Diving deeper into that budget now, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says revenues are under pressure. That says tax collection for 2024-25 is expected to be 22.3 billion rand, lower than estimated in February. Joining me for further analysis is Sars Commissioner Edward Kieswetter. Thank you so much for your time, Commissioner. Tax collections lower than had previously been a forecast. Where are the pressure points here?
Thank you. So what's quite important is that tax collection is a reflection of what's happening in the economy. And when the economy is not performing, we have a real GDP growth projection of just 1%, 1.1%. We have inflation coming down, which is helpful for consumers, but also lowers down prices. So there are three main reasons why the tax revenues are down, and they all relate to what's happening in the economy. So, for example, about 12 billion of the shortfall comes from individual taxes. And there, at the time of the budget, the assumption was that Treasury put in the modeling, the assumption was 8.4% growth of the wage bill. Whereas actually we have only seen 5.4% growth in the wage bill. And the 22,000 jobs that was modeled in have not materialized to the same level. And we are also seeing, as SARS, an increase in the number of directives and tax immigration. Numbers are small, but all of it adds up. The second important downward trend is fuel levies. Again, the assumption at the time of the budget was that there would be a particular level of consumption. We see a 11% downward trend in fuel consumption, amounting to over 1.3 million liters of fuel. Now, the fuel levy can only increase if three things happen. One, if the rate goes up, and we know the rate has been stayed the same. The second is if the volumes go up, and the volume has come down by 11%. And thirdly, if the price goes up, and the price has largely stayed, relative to the year, largely stayed unchanged. So that's the second reason, and that amounts to 8.4 billion. And the third reason relates to a slowdown in import. So at the time of the budget, there was a 1.9% growth of imports. The actual imports year to date was minus 3.7, so more than a 5% swing in imports have resulted in an under recovery, in under collection on import VAT, as well as the related customs duty, and that amounted to 15.7 billion. So that's the three big ones. To offset some of that, we've had, thankfully, a little bit more favorable on corporate taxes. And the reason the minister only looked at a downward revision of 22 billion is we suspect that corporate tax will be sustained, the more positive corporate tax. And we also know that year to date, we've already had more than 1.6 applicants for directives against the two-pot retirement system. That will amount to over 29 billion of outflow into the economy. And the taxes against that will be just over 7.2 billion. So a little bit of attenuation from those two areas. And then, of course, SARS will continue to sustain a focused compliance drive. We do see, however, that consumers are struggling to pay their debt. They are not disputing it. There's a huge increase in the debt repayment arrangements that we've entered into with taxpayers, which accounts for a lower debt collection success as well. Those are the big headline numbers that speak to the revenue outcomes.
The finance minister spoke about the fact that obviously tax revenues are under pressure, that there are difficult trade-offs in all spheres of government that will have to be made. Are there any trade-offs that SARS is in engagements in terms of embarking on?
Trade-offs from our perspective?
Yes.
In terms of of what specifically?
In terms of what you could do with the tax base or any kind of tax increases or any kind of maneuvering that you could do on that front?
There's a number of areas where if we had additional funding we could focus on. The one is we can accelerate the work we do in data science and artificial intelligence. Remember, we do it firstly to bring a better balance between service and risk. So we can select more cases for verification without adding more time, because we can use data science to do some of this verification. Secondly, we can strengthen our non-compliance and fraudulent risk detection technology to select. Already, we have seen a significant contribution from preventing impermissible refunds. And then thirdly, we can select more. If we had been able to bring in more forensic investigators and specialized auditors, we can conduct more audits to raise more money. So in terms of the trade-off for us is we believe that there is uncollected revenue that SARS is not really harvesting because of the funding constraints that we have. But we are engaged with Treasury. They've made some contribution towards increasing the revenue for SARS. The minister announced that today. But we also know that it is not at the level of funding that we want to maintain to support our modernization and the expansion of our capability, and therefore to close the tax gap.
Well, actually, on that, the funding constraints and the additional funding that SARS is looking for, what kind of level, magnitude would SARS be comfortable with at the moment?
Well, I can say this because we shared it with Parliament last week. So I'm not speaking out of turn. So our funding shortfall at the moment, by our estimate, is between 6 and 7 billion rand per year.
I'm actually wondering, Commissioner, during these trying times, just on the individual tax side, how is the willingness for the population of South Africa to be coming forward to pay tax voluntarily?
We've seen an increase in voluntary compliance this year to date of about 2.5 percentage points. You will also recall that we had earlier announced an increase in trust from 48% to 75%, and an increase in attitude towards compliance from 66% to 77.5%. So we sense there is, despite all of the challenges, there's a growing level of confidence, and that reflects in the uplift in compliance behavior, and that augurs well for us. The public want to know that SARS applies its laws without fear, favor, and prejudice, and what would help is if more of the tax offenders can finally be brought to book and be prosecuted.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. We do have to wrap up the conversation there. Commissioner, thank you for giving us insights just in terms of tax from what we got out of the medium-term budget policy statement. That was SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter.